Welcome, welcome. Good day. And today we are having our first live episode, Tell a Story Hive, live on location with Mimi and Bowen. Bowen's behind the camera today. I'm Mimi. And we are at the studio, beautiful studio of Christine Kashuba. And really happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for welcoming us in.
I'm always happy to have people come to my studio.
Wow, there's lots of titles, lots of hats that you've worn over the years. Artist and facilitator, educator, mother, grandmother,
all of those.
All of those.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about when I first met you or heard about you was when you were at the Mackey Lake House in Coldstream, and I believe you were there for 8 or 9 years. So I thought we could start maybe at that place.
Sure.
If you don't mind, if you could share, what Mackey House was for you and explain to the viewers, what that time was like.
Sure. So I started working at Mackey Lake House and really didn't know anything much about it. I did some research before I went for the interview, so I wouldn't appear to be totally incompetent. Yeah. And it was very fun because we had lived in Vernon all of our lives, and Coldstream is attached to Vernon, but is a very unique place. It is its own place. It's not an extension of Vernon. And so I got to know that. So Mackey House itself is a house that was built in 1910. And actually there's just been a book published about it, so you might not have known that, but
Fantastic.
There's a book that tells you all the history of the 3 families that lived in the house. The family that actually built the house came from back east, and in 1910 they built the house, and it was the Buchanan family. And the story goes that Mr. Buchanan was quite determined that his house would be spectacular and that there would be no problems in his house. And so after his day of work, he would go back to where they were constructing the house, and he would walk around. And if there was something he found that he didn't like, he would take his little hatchet to it and make sure they had to take it out and redo that section. So it was well built, and it's a beautiful house. And so it was a pleasure to work there and then to get to know the story. So the Buchanans came first. They lived there for 15 years. Then they moved to Vancouver. They had a house in Shaughnessy, and they moved to Vancouver and lived there. They had sold it to the Leighton family, who came from England. And then the Leightons and the Mackeys were really good friends. So the Leightons had a son that went to the boys' school that the Mackeys ran, and they became really good friends. And at one point, Patty said if there was ever a house that he could, live in or buy or whatever, that would be the Mackey house, which we know is the Mackey house.
Right.
So the Mackeys came to buy the house from the Leightons, and they had run the boys' school in Coldstream for a long time and were looking to retire. So that's when they bought the lake house, which we now know as the Mackey Lake House.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then it was managed by Patty. As his parents aged and passed away, then it became his responsibility.
Do you know how Patty came to the decision to bequeath his home, the Mackey House, to the district of Coldstream, or to?
No, he actually really considered what would happen to the house, because he never married, he never had kids. His brothers had died in the war, so there were no other siblings, and so he was really concerned that the house would stay in its entirety as the house, because he loved the house and he thought it was very rich in history and heritage. And so he actually formed a foundation. I think it was 6 years before he died. He formed the foundation. He actually worked with the first board of directors, and so there was some real input into what the direction of the place would be. And so then when he passed away, the board of directors carried on with that vision. And when I started working there, there were still 3 people on the board who knew Patty. And so that was really great for me, because then I had their input and perspective and the knowledge, about Patty.
Mm-hmm. So while you were there, was your title the manager?
Yeah, I was the manager.
Were you then given the freedom to create programming and decide what kind of events were going to happen? Or?
Yes and no. Yes, to a degree. I had a kind of free reign, but only in that as a heritage site, it has a book that was created by to give direction. So it's got like all it would be like a manual, a how-to manual kind of. And so within there were suggested activities that would line up with the house. So, graffiti on the lawn, no. tea in the veranda. Yes. So,
Makes sense.
and then the house itself had a really eclectic mix of things that the Mackeys had accumulated over their lifetime. And as their neighbors were like, oh, I hate that garish picture with that big gold frame, the Mackeys would value, oh, I know that was an artist that, was from the 1600s or something. And so some of those would come to the house.
And these things are curated throughout the house, aren't they? Or is there a certain room upstairs I'm remembering?
Yeah, the whole house is really curated. So within every room of the house, there's things that are artifacts. But it's kind of, I like to call it a living museum because we actually invited people in to sit on the couches and eat at the table and those kind of things, which most museums don't do.
Mm-hmm. There were also artist residencies that took place there, and what's your experience with that? Yeah,
so that was something else that Patty, I think, really had a vision for. And so people could come as artists in residence, they could stay in the house, and as after the first few years I was there, we had a partnership forum with the Vernon Public Art Gallery. And so the Public Art Gallery would offer an exhibition space, which we didn't have at the Mackey House. So the artists would come, stay and work at the Mackey House, and then exhibit at the gallery. So they had a month to produce work that then would be exhibited at the gallery. So they have an opening and a whole show. So that was really great. And
Right. And how long would the artists usually stay?
A month.
Oh,
they
just
stayed a
for
month.
1 month. Okay.
Yeah. And when I first started working there was also a writer's residence.
So I have a wondering then about your decision to actually go and do your own artist in residence in Texas. I don't know if I can make that jump, or if there were a few steps in between, or had you been on other artist residencies before yourself?
No, but it's something I always thought would be really fun, and I always watched my artist friends who did that, and I thought, oh, if I ever get the opportunity, I want to do that. So once I retired from Mackey House, there kind of was the opportunity to spend more time kind of doing my art and kind of exploring what I might like to do. And so we went for a visit. Our son lives in Amarillo, Texas. And so I thought, I'll just look around here and see if there's any artist residencies. I thought, maybe there's one in Santa Fe or Oklahoma City or somewhere, Denver, somewhere relatively close to where they're living. And to my surprise, they had one in Amarillo. And so that's what I did. I applied for that residency. It was actually a year-long residency, and I wrote them back and said, I really can't do a year. How about, can I do 3 months?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So the thing I found the most fascinating, or one of the things, was that they had taken an old shopping mall that was not very functional as a shopping mall anymore and turned it into an art center. So each storefront was an artist studio. And so they called it the school, which was the Amarillo Arts Institute. And so there was a painting studio with 30 easels set up all the time. There was a glass studio where they blew glass and did fused glass. There was a huge clay studio. There was a weaving studio that had probably 8 or 10 large-sized weaving looms set up all the time. And then there was a kids section, a teaching section, and I probably missed some things. But so the school part of it was that. Wow. And then it was attached to the artist studios. And then there was also I guess it might have been the food court or something originally. So this big space that then people could rent for events and activities and that sort of thing. I went to a place called the Herd Store, and the Herd Store was all kinds of really fascinating Wild West kind of stuff in it. Like you could get a buffalo coat, or you could get a pair of leather boots, but I got a buffalo skull. And so I took the skull and I scrubbed it down really well. And
at your son's house?
Yeah, at my son's house in the front yard with the hose. My granddaughter drew a picture of this. And then let it dry, and then proceeded to do a cyanotype on the skull. And so this wasn't the first skull I had done. Now this sounds really bad. But, my niece works on a ranch in Alberta. And before she went to work on the ranch, she called it a cow catastrophe, where they had a big bone pile because the cows had died because of whatever, I don't know. And so she had asked me, hey, can you do a cyanotype on bone? And I'm like, I don't know, I've never tried that. But if you send me a bone, I'll try it and we'll see what happens.
So just to interrupt for a moment, maybe you could explain briefly what a cyanotype is so that we can connect that with the story.
Sure. A cyanotype is a very old process from the 1800s. It's pre-black and white photography, and it was developed by a guy named Sir John Henschel. And they were looking for ways to do photography and to reproduce, like for scientists to reproduce their notes. So the process became what we know as a blueprint. So house blueprints originally were this process. So this is where it all begins, in the darkroom. So you have to have a red light or a way of preventing light from exposing things before you start, because with a cyanotype, your fabric has been pre-treated and is reactive to light. So usually we would take this outside into the sunshine, but today is not that kind of day and it's late in the day. So I've created kind of a fake sunshine with some UV light over here with my little plant
because
growing.
You're a creative woman who is free-flowing.
Yes, and so we're going to do this. So we're going to go back out into my studio. I'm going to pop this under here and turn on the lights. So if this was a nice day, it would be going outside. This funny little gadget that I've also got under here is a light meter. And so it's just going to tell us how much light is getting onto this, which is none at the moment because I need to turn this on, which is here. So it's going to just do this process, this blue and white process is you take two chemicals, you mix them together, it makes them light sensitive. When they're light sensitive, you paint it onto any porous thing. So I typically use fabric, but it can be fabric, it can be paper, it can be bone, it can be wood, it can be anything that will absorb some of the chemical. And then you let it dry overnight, and the next day you take it out in the sun with a sandwich. So you have your prepared fabric, paper, bone, whatever, and whatever you're going to want to have on top of it. So it might be botanicals, it might be a photograph that you've printed onto a transparency, it might be painting on glass, and wherever the sun hits your package, when you take it out in the sun, wherever the sun hits it, it turns blue. But wherever it's blocked, it stays white or light. And so that's how you produce the images. So part A is potassium ferrocyanide, and part B is ferric ammonium citrate. And these are produced by Jacquard Company, and there's other companies that produce them as well.
Are they pretty pricey or?
Probably these are not, as a set, not that expensive, maybe $25, something like that. And so they come with just powder in them, and you have to add the water and mix the chemicals.
Right.
So when you're making a cyanotype, you take an equal amount, part A and part B, and mix them together. Then they're light sensitive. Then you need to use your darkroom to apply it to your fabric.
Once
paper.
you mix them together, how much time do you have?
Yeah, as long as you're in a darkroom, it doesn't matter so much. It's more, you just don't want to put them out in the sunshine, because as soon as you put them in the sunshine, they start to develop. On the buffalo head, I put the map of Texas, and I put some plants that were native to there, whatever, took it out, exposed it in the sun. And then the second part of it is you have to wash away all the chemicals that you didn't want, that you didn't develop, and that you don't want, because if you leave them there, it'll just turn solid blue.
Right.
My idea when I was in Texas is I wanted to make art with stuff that was native to there. So I didn't want to make stuff, with Gerber daisies or something that, might be just generic anyway. So I started this whole process into these by talking about denim wood. In the early 2000s, I wanted to find a process to talk about denim wood. So I went out to Tolko, shot some photography, took it into the darkroom. I was at university at the time, and produced a series of work about the pine beetle, which was producing denim wood.
Okay, I didn't know that this is what it's called, denim wood.
Yeah, so I started with photography and created big transparencies to do those pieces. And then as I came into my home studio, I didn't have that resource. So you can just use botanicals. And so these are botanicals. And wherever they turned this beautiful blue, the sun hit it. Wherever it was blocked by the leaves or the grass or whatever, then it stays white or light.
These are stunning. And it feels like I'm in nature in these ones. They don't feel placed.
No, they're placed only in that I put the branches down, but what happens is always a mystery. So that's one of the things I love about this process is you can plan and prepare, and unless you're using like a photographic, like a transparency or a painting, you really don't know how it's going to turn out. So this is a rubbing that I did on a piece of mylar off the tree. So the tree trunks I rubbed, like you rub with a pencil, but I used a black oil pastel, and that's how I did that.
Beautiful.
So botanicals can be done. I talked about wearable art, so I've done some bags with straight up botanicals. I've done hats and using stencils and using feathers. I love this one because look at the detail, and that's just exactly the way the sun and the feathers produced it. So there's if you get it right, you can get that amount of detail.
Do you think that's a hawk's feather?
I'm not sure what it is, but I'm sure somebody could tell me because I don't know feathers well enough. And then I started going, okay, so what would happen if I took the botanicals and I started combining them with other things? So I took big pieces of glass and drew and painted on the glass. So in this piece, you've got the botanicals, so the fireweed tight against the fabric, which makes it the whitest. Then you have this big piece of glass that I drew and painted on. Over top of the botanicals to hold them up. I started playing around with like, okay, what happens if we incorporate this or that or try this or that?
Oh, it's fun to play.
It very much is. And so here's an example of how this works. So that's the finished piece in the blue and white. And this is the drawing that I did. And I'm going to just take this dark background away so you can see it against the white. So that's the painting that I did to produce the artwork. So the painting was done with black acrylic. One of the paints is called Mishus Iron Oxide. I just love the way it sounds. So, but it's got minerals in it, so it makes it really intense to block the light. So that's, with both the bicycle one and with this one, it was a drawing on glass that helped to create the image. And then there's the whole adventure of doing something called a wet cyanotype, which means that you leave the chemicals wet. You don't dry it first. You add other things in. So these three little guys were all done as wet cyanotypes. When the chemical is wet, you can add in, so this one, I think there was turmeric and ground sumac and coffee grounds and soap bubbles, and I don't remember what all else. But it takes a very long time. So if an exposure on a hot sunny day of one of these other ones is say 5 minutes, the wet cyanotypes take 4 to 6 hours, let's say. So you leave them out, you really don't know what's going to happen to them. But you can get those other kind of colors coming in because you can introduce other things into the mix. So that's how those are created. And that's kind of a fun thing to do. And because my artwork, the cyanotypes, are kind of one-offs, I've created art cards. So I have a collection of art cards. So
yeah, they are very unique. For me, I'm just learning about it for the first time. So do you know of other artists that are close by, like in the Okanagan, that are doing this? Or
I do have a friend, Judy Templeton, had done some. She's a printmaker, and so she had done some. She moved down from Fort St. John, and so we did some cyanotypes together. But not at the scale that I.
Right.
I don't know other people.
But you've been teaching a lot of young children.
Yes.
So who knows?
That's right. And when I was in Texas, just as I was getting ready to leave, I did meet a couple of cyanotype artists who lived like a couple hours away. And so I hadn't met them at the beginning, but I did meet them as I was leaving. And so one of them was teaching at a college. So I'm sure that there's going to be.
Of course, yeah.
And kind of, I think during COVID too, a lot of people were stuck at home and wanted to find something they could do, and this is something you can do. So if you want to do a really simple version of it, you can go like in Vernon, we've got Teach and Learn. They call them solar papers, or you can go online and buy little solar papers, and you can test it out on a small version, or you can go to Opus in Kelowna and buy the larger prepared fabric, and it's a little bit more pricey. but it's a bigger size, 8.5 by 11, so you can produce that. And then you don't have to mix up the chemicals and do all that part. It comes already dry, already like in a special foil sealed bag, so that you don't expose it to light, but you don't have to mess with chemicals. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, so then this piece was part of a show that I did. It was called The Modern Elder. And so there was a traveling show that went around BC to quite a few different locations. And I think, I can't remember how many artists there were, maybe 14, something like that. And so that show traveled around and was exhibited in different galleries. And then, yeah, then we have like I was
there's
talking about
lampshades.
the lampshades. So here's something how these things happen. I went to an art garage sale at the art center, and my friend had purchased these lampshades that were white, and you could assemble them, but she hadn't done anything with them. So I bought them at the garage sale, and I brought them home, and I did cyanotypes on them. So there's an artist out of the UK that does just lampshades, and she does a beautiful job. And that's kind of what inspired me to try that. So
Oh,
yeah,
they're beautiful.
yeah. And then just the other things that I do. So the wearable kind of art, like the tablecloths, and then scarves, tea towels, all kinds of pillows. This year I ventured into pillows because I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a piece on your wall and then a piece on your couch or
Absolutely.
chair
A
or
nice
whatever.
white linen couch with a pop of
Color,
denim
yeah.
blue.
Yeah, so this one is non-traditional colors because it is on yellow fabric. So like the pillows are on colored fabric, which is why there's color in them. This was on a colored bright yellowy green fabric. And so when I put the cyanotype chemicals on it, it turned more green, or it has more greens in it than just blue. So, and that was a wet cyanotype, so that took a long time too. It was out in the sun for a long time. And it also had some turmeric in it and other things in it, so that probably also brought out that yellow that you wouldn't have ordinarily.
It's very pretty.
I wanted to share what I had done and what I had learned, and kind of engage with the public. And so I've kind of always been about that, about connecting with the community and doing fun things in the community. So I'm like, okay, the first Friday's going to be different here because I don't have a big facility to open up and do that with. But what if it was instead that people came to artist studios? Because I've noticed that people are really curious about your process as an artist, and they want to know kind of how you do things and why you do things and what you do. And so the idea is to open up the studio so people can come and have a look. Yeah, so we can go have a look at how our exposure is going along over here, see how things are going.
Do we have another poem or saying? Or...
Another saying, no. Starlight, star bright.
Oh, and action.
Starlight, star bright. Oh no, it's not a star. It's just a light. But yeah, so we're about halfway to where we would ordinarily do this. But I think we're going to see if we can get something happening anyways. So I have these lovely tubs, indispensable, and you just fill it with water because when you are done exposing the cyanotype, then you want to bring it and wash out any chemical that hasn't developed and that is still in the paper or the fabric, so that it doesn't continue to develop.
And Christine was telling me that this beautiful studio space was actually slated to just be filled in with dirt.
True. It was supposed to be cement walls around it with filled in with dirt. So we're gonna see if we have any. It might be a very faint image because it should be like twice as much light as usual. So you can take this off, and when you lift this up, you can see. Wow. So where that is light colored, it's going to become white. And you can see the water's turning a little bit green. So that's just the chemical coming out of there. And I'm going to just shut all these things off because we don't need them to be going on. So when I mix the chemicals together and paint it on a piece of fabric, it's lime green. And so then as it's out in the sun and it starts to develop, it changes, it goes through this transition from lime green into kind of a duller green, into a gray blue, into kind of a tan blue gray. So when you get to that point, you know it's done. So for years and years, I didn't have the light meter. I just looked at the stuff and said, okay, it looks like this is done, right? And it worked. So you don't need to have a light meter to do this at all.
Right.
You can just, use your judgment. We dump out this water. Sorry, you're not able to see this very well. There. See it a little better now? And you can see it's a very soft blue color. And that is because you didn't expose it for very long, right? So it's about a third maybe of strength to what ordinarily would happen. So you can see it's just a very, very soft blue. So people ask me sometimes, like, how come this one's darker and how come that one's lighter? And sometimes it's not just how long it's in the light, but the strength of the light. So on a hot sunny day, you're in real danger of things disappearing. So this piece behind me, I almost lost because I left it out in the sun too long. So you can see the fireweed, but you can see that some of it's starting to be like you're hardly seeing it. And so that's what happened with that one. That one's out almost.
And actually, that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
So it can be a happy accident sometimes as well.
That's right. So yeah.
And it's a heart shape. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. And so that's the challenge is each one is going to be its own thing, and it's a bit serendipity. You cannot always predict what it's going to be in the end. Look at the funny color this one is.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, I'm not sure. It's got like some almost eco-print kind of feel to it.
Right. I can imagine, because I like stitching, embroidery, I can imagine how much fun it would be to have a piece like this and then just play with stitching around it. Amazing.
Yeah, so now the last step in our cyanotype is the lovely, you need a little hydrogen peroxide. So what the hydrogen peroxide does, whoops, I have things like dried and pressed flowers and things all over. So if anybody ever, wondered what they did with old phone books, old catalogs.
Those were the days.
Well, because I've collected
Yeah,
things
you've got them pressed inside.
Yeah, so that,
of course.
to keep them so that there's the daisy page.
Yeah.
Or a daisy page, right?
Beautiful, yeah. There's still a practical use for, well, that's a U-line, but phone books,
Yeah.
right? Haven't seen one of those for a
Phone
while.
books aren't thick enough now
So
to
should
even
I
do
bring
that.
things like that over to your house, to your studio?
Yeah, I can always use them, right?
A flower press.
Okay, so this last step is if you're doing with photo papers, they don't tell you this in the photo paper stuff. And you can see I very carefully measured that amount. Exactly the right amount.
Good, I like this kind of science.
Yeah.
Splash of this, splash of that.
Yeah. And so when I put this in here with the kids, this is where the most fun is because it will actually darken up the image. So in this case, it didn't darken it very much because let's put this, sorry, get this down here. Put it over here so you can actually, so it does darken it up.
Yeah.
And it makes it more intense. So that's like the final step. And like I say, that's the wimpiest cyanotype I've done in a while because it really doesn't have very much contrast and it really doesn't have very intense
But
color.
you took us through the steps.
That's right. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you know that that can happen. Like for every piece you see like this, there may have been 2 or 3 pieces like that were fails.
Right.
Right?
So what do you do with your fails?
Well, up till now, I've been kind of just hanging on to some of them. But most of them, if they're really not good, I just recode it and do it again.
I was wondering, you can just, you can just do it again.
And what happens, though, is whatever you did at the bottom comes through. So you have to be aware that that's going to happen. And so it may or may not turn out the way you want.
Right.
But, and if it's actually totally a disaster and you just hate it, there's the garbage can.
There's the garbage can. Wonderful. Thank you for walking us through those steps.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Christine Kashuba, artist, facilitator, educator, you've taught us a lot today. And also really knowledgeable, amazing human. I'm so grateful for all of your stories and your sharing today. And one more time for the viewers about the first Fridays.
Yeah, so it's every first Friday of the month, and there's always going to be a group of artists that are going to open their studios and really want you to come visit. So take the opportunity and get to know your local artists and come visit their studios.
Yeah.